Don't fear that you don't know what you don't know, as you'll be seeing right through it after we talk transparency and full disclosure with Rob Scypinski of Hilton Hotels in the breakout room. Now let's explore a unique Canadian experience, and we'll be back to start the show. Hello. We want to welcome you to the breakout room. This is your forum. We want to welcome you to ask as many questions, both anonymously and live, through our chat tool. Right above me, there's a little icon you can click on, which will allow you to ask questions during the session. I also want to remind you that with today's session, you also can get CMP credits. We've talked to CIC, and many of the recorded sessions, as well as the live sessions, can be watched, and you earn one CMP credit for each show. So please visit them as you get a chance. Today we are actually in beautiful Toronto, as you can see behind me. Spectacular city. Been fortunate enough to be there as a guest, a host, an attendee on many occasions. I think one of the things we can all say for any of us who have been back there is that the city has done such an incredible transformation. To have a vibrant downtown, it has, I think it's like 16 miles of underground, a labyrinth basically called the Path, that takes you basically from hotels to convention centers, which, obviously when a few of them moved out of the igloos, it was a great idea for them to build those paths. But it really is a phenomenal city and a great destination for meetings. And one of the great things also within that region is the Niagara region and the wine country that you can visit both pre or post from your convention. So, and actually our guest today, Rob Scypinski, happens to be right across the lake, or from right across the lake, or maybe actually right across two lakes, if you consider Ontario and then Erie, from Erie, Pennsylvania. Rob is a veteran of the industry, to say the least. His career with Hilton started back in 1984, if I believe. With Hilton, yeah. With Hilton, and actually the whole time with Hilton, right? And then right now he's VP of Sales, or actually started as VP of Sales for the West Coast back in 2004, and have now, you are officially titled
VP of Sales for the Americas.
For the Americas, fantastic. And one of the great things about Rob is not only has he been in the industry for a long time and certainly worked for a great hotel company for so long, but he also came out of school in the industry as a graduate of Penn State University. So he supported the hotel restaurant management school there for many years with teaching and being involved in hiring and interns and everything else. So exciting opportunity there. And I certainly welcome to this trailblazing experience in this live webcast that is being brought to you by PlanNet and the CTC, the Canadian Tourism Commission. And if you are ever in a situation where you need to consider a unique destination, I highly recommend you contact your CTC representative. The Canadian Tourism Commission is a phenomenal group that can help you pick the right city, pick the right destination, and get your questions answered. It's a easy transition across the border to this neighboring country, and we'd welcome you to consider it. If you don't have a contact already, let us know. Email us at the breakout room, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with the right person. Now, I want to point out again that above is that question button. You please click there during the session and ask live questions, because we have Amy here who's going to be asking them to us during the session while we're talking to Rob. And it's also a great place to just do the oohs and ahs. As you hear things that stimulate you, that excite you, or that really tick you off, it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. So why don't we get started with some of the content.
Great.
Today we're going to cover a couple different areas within transparency. So why don't I start with really defining transparency. Why are we talking transparency today?
Well, I think we continue to have this dialogue, not only here but across PCMA, MPI, SAE, is really because it continues to be relevant. It continues to be concerning. People are very passionate about this. It's kind of like the attrition topic, never goes away. And people really grapple with answers. What is fair, what is equitable, what should I know, what's none of my business, types of things. And so, there's a place for transparency in so many areas, and I know today we'll get in some of those areas, such as disclosure of commissions or ways of doing business and that type of thing. And hopefully we can have some rich dialogue and some call-in, and people can get things off their chest, or they can find out viewpoints from both of us.
And I think it's a great point, because I think one of the things that's really hard in our industry in general is just definition. And transparency and disclosure, although there are formal Webster definitions for them, I think become very vague as we start talking about them in our own industry. Some people feel extremely strong that you should be telling everything and basically data dumping, to the other extreme of not saying anything. And obviously we got to find some happy medium in between to have great partnerships.
Absolutely.
Right? So hotel companies have disclosure policies in place. Some of them are putting it in contracts, some of them are just speaking them. How did those evolve? Where did they come from?
I think they have evolved because we had some unscrupulous behavior. You know, on all ends. You know, there was a case, I think what really brought it to the industry's attention, years ago there was a gentleman at Boca, which happens to be one of our hotels now in the Waldorf Collection, but back then he was the director of sales and marketing, and he set up multiple fake travel agencies, and he was writing commission into the contracts that he was writing with customers and paying himself. And this went on for some time until he amassed quite an amount of money. Well, he was sent to jail for obviously extortion of his employer's funds and defrauding customers. And really, it went further than defrauding the meeting organization, but it went to defrauding everyone that slept in the bed.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that our whole industry, obviously, in any case, right, whether it's government regulation or just rules that we put in place for ourselves, always has to be one bad apple that sets it out, right?
I think one got caught.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
There was probably others, and hopefully they all, you know, set a straight path. But, you know, it became a concern for our company, for Hilton, and we began our due diligence and really understanding what was the best way to be transparent. What was the best way for all parties to understand what was going on? And our legal folks became involved. And what we came out with was that it should be front and center in the contract. That it should be disclosed, the amount of the commission, as well as who it's being paid to. And that was really to protect everybody. Because we also have the situation on the other side where a third party does a lot of work. They bring the business to the hotel. They're even executing. And I had one where 2-3 months before the event, we got a note from the organization that said, we're going to retain that commission. We've parted ways with this organization, and the commission should come to us. And our contract was very clear that who the commission belonged to, legally.
Right. And
we said, in all due respect, we cannot do that until we get something in writing from the third party that releases them from their possession of that. And we took a stance. It was a hard stance. It cost us a 10-year relationship with that organization. They would not do business with our organization for 10 years after that because they felt that they legally owned that money.
It is incredible. And we use that another definition aspect of this is certainly that third-party term, because it's been everything from a four-letter word to everything else. But help me define, what are the different types of third parties, or what kind of services should I expect from the term third party?
Well, there are a number of vendors in the supply chain, so to speak, the hotel being one of them. You know, you have your production AV partners, busing partners, DMCs, planning partners, search and, you know, seizure and contracting and sourcing and all that. So all of those might wear the moniker third party at some point in time. But in Hilton, we look at a third party as really the person who is bringing us business. Now, whether they operate the business or do the housing for the business, or certainly just do the sourcing and contracting, I think there's a whole spectrum. And that value really of the planner, the organization hiring that individual or that firm to say, this is the scope of work I want you to cover, is really between them.
We've got a lot of listeners here who are either working with third parties and watching, you know, obviously if you've worked with a third party or considered it or absolutely ruled it out, I think one of the things that is important for them to understand is, how do you look at them, though? I mean, do you care if they have an IATA number? Do you care if they have certificates of insurance or have insurance at certain levels?
You know, clearly, those parameters are very important to us. You know, we want to know who we're doing business with. We want to, will we pay anybody a commission? Not really. You know, we want to be very select, but, you know, does certain organizations have an IATA number? Well, if they have, you know, a great critical mass of business, I don't know that we're as focused on that as we are on that are you the agency of record? You know, can you produce a letter of agreement saying, I have the representation of this organization, I am able to contract on their behalf, or I'm able to negotiate on their behalf? And those are things that are of great interest to us.
Well, it'll keep planners from getting burned, too. I mean, if they have a detailed scope of work outlined with that organization or person who's working for them, they have something they can hold them accountable to, and also will allow them to obviously get better results and also not have somebody walk away. I mean, these are big checks that are being written to some people, and clearly there should be an expectation to deliver services too. Any other advice you can give some of the planners that are watching on, you know, how they can better protect themselves? Or you've worked with a lot of organizations.
Well, you know, some of the pitfalls that I've seen are, you know, organizations that aren't really clearly defined on the scope of work. You know, that is between the organization that's going to produce the meeting and the third party whenever their scope of work is. The hotel wants to know what your role is. And by asking it, our expectation of the representative of the organization is that you're able to speak on their behalf very extensively. We're training our salespeople in ways to help the customer. We want to know business objectives. We want to understand what the outcome is. We want to know what an ROI measurement is. And if you're an intermediary of some sort and you don't know those answers, then I take exception to your role and to the importance that the end user is putting on you, because we're serious about doing business. We're serious about our customers' success and playing a role in that success. And if somehow we're not able to ascertain those bits of information, we have concerns right from the beginning about being able to really be the partner you need in a hotel.
Absolutely. And if you're the host organization, obviously picking that hotel, as we've talked about, you know, there's no soulmate for my meeting, if you will, for a hotel. No. As many of the salespeople have probably felt that over the years. I think, but on the other side, I think it is really important that we do understand how that property is going to work for us, how it's going to fit our meeting. And requiring a third party or anybody that you're working with to be very consultative with you. But that takes both parties listening, right? I mean, it's not just me talking. I've got to be a good listener on the other side, because sometimes you feel like they're overselling or they're trying to sell as opposed to giving you good advice.
You've got to be a good listener.
Right? You really do. It is very hard. But going into that consultative versus transaction aspect, I mean, there are all kinds of, in the sourcing area where we've been kind of leading right now, there's so many different types of third parties. And there's the consultative side, to the transactional side, to even the software side, which might be considered transactional. Mm-hmm. How are you seeing that evolving right now?
It is an area of great dynamic and interest. It's emerging. Every other day you're hearing about a new electronic platform to deliver you a lead. And through that, we're evolving a new term called lead spam. And lead spam, in our eyes as hoteliers, is the tire kicker. It's everybody that's interested, and those people who are able to send out leads, whether you're the direct planner, whether you're a third party, is really to be a qualified piece of business. And what I mean by qualified is you have a reasonable amount of cities, I would say one or two, that you have a reasonable brand or type of hotel that you're looking for. But on average, we're seeing leads coming through some of these electronic platforms, 90 hotels. Mm-hmm.
But if I'm a more junior planner and I have this responsibility, I may not know a lot of the cities, right? I'm trying to learn this marketplace and how it goes. I mean, what you're implying in some ways makes me have to do a lot more work. And I'm already overworked as a planner. I've got 9 jobs. I'm working, my staff at my organization is short of staff already, right? If I'm working for an association or corporation. How do I do that? How do I achieve that?
You know, there's any number of ways. I mean, the internet is a wealth of information.
Okay.
I think your direction needs to come from the organizers, your leadership. If you're a junior planner and you're not quite sure where you're going, well, what do they want to achieve? You know, if they want to achieve a lot of team building and teamwork and outdoors, you know, taking your meeting to Erie, Pennsylvania in December may not be the best place for you to go. Okay?
Hey, well, there are churches and bars. Why not?
There could be some good team building there. But, you know, from the standpoint of clear direction from the top. Now, you get the direction, you say, I still don't know this destination. I don't know this brand. I don't know this independent that happens to be there. I think there is, you know, your GSOs, you have your bureaus, and then you have your third-party partners to help you, you know, through some of those. it's, direct, call the hotel directly. But, pulling up, I had a friend recently who was trying to do a favor for me, and she was trying to send me a meal while I was home in Erie from the best restaurant here. She's never been there. Erie does not have a lot of great restaurants. She went online and she found a list of the 15 top rated restaurants in Erie.
Nice.
So you can find a lot of information today if you put the effort to it.
And I think you made a good point. You do need to hold your third party accountable, especially if they are getting a large check from that hotel for doing this work. You should be holding them accountable to do that research for you and provide that information for you so that they can help you through that process and help you through the thinking process.
Absolutely.
But how is the hotel side changing? I mean, it seems that sometimes you talk to some really educated hotel people who know their destination, know their competition, know their own property. And these days it's also separating into those that are consultative and those that are transaction-based.
Absolutely.
How do I make sure I'm getting a consultative salesperson?
I think you know pretty immediately. And when you're talking to the big brands, it's, listen, if you're not in the first half hour of engagement with that individual, they're not asking you questions about business, about your objectives, about what your ROI and what you want to accomplish, and they go right to ballroom size or number of rooms. Now that has to be qualitative. We have to make sure that the business is appropriate for the building we're putting it in. But that should be a pretty quick or come right with the lead, and then get into more conversation about objectives and how we can help meet you. And I think a good salesperson sometimes has to turn away a piece of business saying, we're just not the right fit for you. And that's the job of third parties, GSOs, property people that I represent, to be that honest and transparent with the customer.
Well, and there's definitely a huge frustration on the hotel sales side of who they're talking to too, because you got to be selective if you're a planner and hiring that third party, because they want to know more about your meeting, so they're booking and giving you the right concessions and the right rate that will fit within your parameters. And if they're working with transaction-based third parties who are literally just sending a lead versus somebody who wants to earn your business and learn about your organization, learn about your industry, it's going to be a tough battle for the salespeople and communication, right?
We're talking about transparency, and it's not just all about commissions and all.
Yep.
Part of that transparency is, if you're serious about booking a piece of business, present yourself. Present your organization. Be proud about that. But more and more people are hiding behind electronic transference. They want to just wallpaper the place with, tell me what you got, and you never hear from them again. And we have got to get that under control.
How is that hurting them? How is that hurting that planner?
Well, I would think, from the planner standpoint, it's easy to push the buttons and say, let's check these hotels. But they've got to read through all the information coming back at them.
Right.
And salespeople by nature are tenacious.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Do you really want to incite 90 people, 90 hotels? How many of those hotels are going to call you? Let's say only half of them call you.
Right.
There's 45 calls that are going to come your way. And, when we see do not contact customer, whatever, there is so much lead activity coming at the hotels these days that, we're going to have to make decisions on who we're going to respond to. And I hear constantly from customers, we need you to be more responsive. Your people aren't responsive. But it's a bit of a catch-22 because they're getting wallpapered with all these leads, and trying to understand who's serious, who's not serious, what are we doing is really frustrating for us, to the point where we're going to sit down with those electronic lead sources because they're the quickest. We've already had initial conversations, asking them to bring us all together, the big brands, themselves, to say, how do we fix this? Because electronic transfer has its place. It's important. It's efficient. But it cannot be efficient for one and cause the other pain and suffering.
Okay, so I've got my lead out. Now, in preparing for this meeting over the last months, I mean, we've been talking about doing this meeting for a long time, and this topic, because it really has been a hot topic. And a lot of the people who we talked to and crowdsourced for this meeting really were, beyond the getting the lead out and distribution through a third party or any other source, was understanding hotel revenue streams and understanding how can I position my meeting better to get better space, get better properties, get better rates, everything else. So do you mind sharing with everybody some of the revenue streams, and so that they can truly understand how you're making your money so that they can position their meeting better?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say to me, do I have a good piece of business? Or going back to the very famous Darrell Hartley Leonard speech, he was the president of Hyatt, back in '88, when he addressed a crowd of meeting planners at PCMA and said, hey, listen, some of you have ugly babies, and you got to know that. So there are a million variables, literally, and this is why we haven't gone to electronic transference for the full booking spectrum, is you know, is a 50-room meeting that needs 50,000 square feet of space a good meeting? You know what? If it's for tomorrow and a place that has that kind of availability, yeah, it's a good meeting. 20 years from now, probably not so good.
Right.
You know, and every little variable that you introduce into the equation can skew it.
I think we want to be absolute most of the time when we ask,
Yeah.
is my meeting good or bad? And there's never really
People
an
like black
absolute
and
answer,
white.
right?
They want a black and white.
They do.
Now, as far as revenue streams, we have a program in Hilton that we've had for probably about 15 years, and it's called HOST, Hotel On-Site Training, where we invite customers to a hotel, and we're very transparent with them. We open our books. We take them to the back of the house. We take them to the front of the house. They see what housekeepers do. They see what all of a sudden we want turned down for everybody costs the hotel.
Right.
Really, you want turned down for everybody, and we want it between 8 and 8:30. You know, and you're like, okay, you're only 1,000 rooms. How many people will that take? So they get a good sense. But one of the things that struck me when we started to do that program, and I was the director of sales on property at the time, was I would do the session about opening our books and walking them through the P&L. And I would ask everybody, what do you think a hotel's biggest revenue stream is? 90% of the time, revenue was food and beverage.
Food and beverage. Interesting.
Now, the profit, what do you think is the most profitable? Food and beverage. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
You know, in many ways, in restaurant operations and all, we can't run fast enough from a restaurant operation. It is a loss leader in a hotel. And so if you go in the hotel and say, you know what, I'm not going to have any official function, I'm going to leave everybody on their own.
But I'm a planner. I don't believe this. Like, I'm sitting on this call, I'm watching this show, and I'm going, you know what? How can you charge $160 for a gallon of coffee and that
now,
not
I
be
said
profitable?
restaurants.
Right,
I said restaurants,
I know,
okay?
But I want to be
now,
clear in this,
so
right?
banquets, you know, helps balance out the food and beverage operation. All those people we need to employ in the hotel, because there's an intake of procurement and at the dock, and accepting that food and storing that food and categorizing it and then distributing it to the right place. And then there's the whole cooking of it, then there's the whole serving of it, then there's the whole cleanup of it, and then there's the preparing the bill of it. So, you know, you pass that chicken down the line, and what I used to do is I used to say, why is a chicken dinner, you know, this astronomical price? And I would take this rubber chicken, and we would pass it down the line and have everyone tell them what they had to do with that to get it to that guest's plate. And after that, I had an educated customer. I had a customer that understood what that meant. Now, it's up to us to try and add value to that experience. Right. And we work hard every day to say, how can we make that banquet experience more interactive? How can we make it better? One of our hotels came by, and this was just brilliant. Most people that sit down at a banquet table, do they really know each other?
Right.
You're attending a convention, you might be with one other person, whatever. They sit down at the banquet table, and they made these polished rocks. And it had subject questions about the content of the meeting on the rocks, but then it also had, what was your favorite Seinfeld episode? And the waiter, after introducing himself, would pick up a rock and say, this is what these are for. We want you to get to know each other, because you didn't come, you could have sat on the telephone and had this meeting.
Right.
So, what was your favorite Seinfeld episode? And the conversation starts, but it eventually, as they pick up the stones, they start talking about the content of the meeting, the speakers, what was the highlight. And they start really engaging and have a higher level that it costs really very little, but we're trying to help the planners have a better experience and their attendees have a better experience.
So from a transparency perspective, and you know, obviously what comes along with that naturally is service charges and everything else, right, and gratuities. And I think a lot of planners have asked us, you know, where is that money really going? I see these big numbers and big percentages in my contract now, and you know, they've gotten to a point where they're 30, 35%, 40% in some cases. By the time you add all that stuff up, I know exactly.
I want them in my portfolio.
Exactly. but really, where is that money going? How is that being distributed?
The money is going to be very transparent. In a Hilton contract, it's very transparently outlined, because number one, we don't want class action suits by the unions against us. We don't want customers coming back. So it's very transparent. If it's 18% and we call it gratuity, it's going to the server. And the majority of that money goes to the server. There might be 1 or 2% that's held by the hotel, but it has to be outlined that way, and it has to be disclosed that way in the contract that the hotel retains as well.
And are you comfortable with a planner further defining that with you in the contract to either control that a little bit more, that has to be an approved list of people? Because I may not want everybody to get that work my meeting.
No, because many of our hotels are union, and that's very closely ruled by union, you know, by our labor contracts and who is who gets what out of that pool of gratuity.
So look at it, obviously, based on whether or not it might be a union or non-union hotel in some
Absolutely.
cases.
But you have every right to ask. You have every right to say, well, does the stewarding department get this? Or, who really benefits from this gratuity? Absolutely, you have every right to ask, and we better be prepared to tell you.
Well, I think that working knowledge of understanding how gratuities and how that all works is key, and I think people need to be more open to ask the question. If you guys are willing to be that transparent and willing to tell the story, then I think we just have to encourage everybody to ask the question more and stop wondering or guessing.
We try very hard to live by a no-surprise rule in our company.
Can you define what we were getting a little bit into this before, but I know this is a big issue for most people, and we have a question actually that just came in.
Yes. Actually, in the spirit of openness, several people have asked about typically a hotel's reluctance to audit their hotel blocks, perhaps identifying the owners and disclosing that information in the contract, as well as do you require that everyone's commission be actually a part of the contract?
Okay. There's a lot of questions. So let me start with, I think I heard the first thing was the ownership. So the ownership, I don't think we have in any of our contracts that we have, that we can't tell you who owns the building. But, in essence, the brands are who you're dealing with. So the brands are paid to manage the asset. They're paid to do the business. So the owner could be thousands of people. It could be a REIT, So I guess I would want to ask a qualifying question of why is it important to you? To really understand why you're asking that question, and maybe to better answer it for you once I understood why you're asking it.
Well, but in light of where the markets have been in recent years, and certainly with foreclosures and everything else,
certainly,
obviously hitting many properties,
yep.
How would that play into that decision of knowing that information? How do you feel about me asking or putting clauses in there that relates to that?
Well, people do put in clauses about ownership change. They're putting in clauses about what happens in the case of a bankruptcy. Right. Usually a receiving bank, a receivership, whoever's going to take over that asset from the defaulting party is most likely going to keep the management contract in place until they figure out what they're going to do with the asset. Are they going to retain it? Are they going to sell it? And the management contracts often are written that, we retain that contract for 20 years, and it doesn't really matter. Is it, an insurance company that owns it or a REIT that owns it? What? So we try and protect it all the way that the brand you're buying is the brand that's going to run your meeting. And then
the second part of that question.
The second part was regarding room audits.
Oh, your room audits. To me, that is an absolute must. We've got to audit. In fact, we have a tool in our company that's been automated for, 7, 8, 9 years called GRIP.
Right.
And it was really developed by a hotel person at the New Orleans Hilton that was trying to help their customer. And he happened to have a software background. So he wrote this code that was able to overlap lists and immediately, so you're not sitting there one by one with the books all day saying this. And, what we do with those people is part of what's got to set forth in the agreement. Do they get counted? Do they not get counted? Are they creditable? We credit them. They were there because you had the meeting. We want that to reflect on your post-convention report. But, are we going to give comps? Are we going to pay commission on that? And that all has to be discussed at the time of the contract. My feeling is, if you've been hired to manage housing as a third-party entity, and people around the block, that's really your problem. And you don't deserve to get that commission. You didn't do your job. People who in the housing simply take a name and pass it along to the hotel are not housing companies.
Well, and we've had this conversation, especially comparing the technology with the service. And I think we all use the word housing as just this blob that's out there, right?
Right.
It's all of that, and it's not. There's so many different components of it. Are there questions that somebody could ask to help better understand whether they're getting the right company or qualifying that the people that are managing
absolutely.
It? What would those
So
be?
questions are, how are you going to help me build my attendance? How are you going to help me with, I call it the fence sitter strategy. People have registered for the event, but haven't made their hotel reservation. If I have a history of struggling to fill my blocks, what are some of your expertise? You do this every day. What have you seen other customers do? What are best practices? Are you familiar with the CIC 72 pages on best practices, all the research that has been done that so many people just ignore, and they throw up their hands and go, I can't control my attendee. That
Or even
that
that the
is
cities
a
are
really
supporting.
poor answer.
Even the cities are supporting it in many cases. There's some really innovative cities with some great marketing materials.
Absolutely,
out there, right?
absolutely. I saw Baltimore yesterday. I was there. I was telling you, that city has really gone above and beyond. And to Amy and Sam, if you're watching, I was so impressed with the marketing materials they've developed for the attendee to be delivered through the association or the corporation, whatever, to help them, because they know Baltimore is an emerging destination. It's not yet primary, but it's got great facilities, got great things. They do all these. They spend all this money. Very few customers will take it. I don't get that.
Did you have another question that was in there that we didn't answer?
No, that's good. I have other questions, but when you get to the topics, we'll relate to them.
Great.
Okay, so the other aspect is commissions, right?
Yeah.
I want to get into that just a little bit because, you know, why are you paying commissions? I mean, why are hotels paying it?
Well, you know, it's an environment, and there is it started back with the travel agent. You know, you're bringing us business, and at 10% at that time, you know, it was $1.
Right.
It wasn't a lot of money way back when hotel rates were really low, and that's what happened. And over the years, it's grown, and this concept of 10% is just stuck. It's like 1 per 50 or 80%, you know, is the level that attrition starts. I don't know where all these things started, but somehow they've stuck in our industry, and they've simply become boilerplate stuff.
The other word that's used a lot right now is rebate also. How can you differentiate for the audience, what's the difference between a rebate and a commission?
You know, I can't, because you have to, that has to be understood at the time of contracting. Commission usually pays a third party for services. A rebate usually goes back to the association or the corporation or whoever for some other service. Could be busing, could be to underwrite the convention center, could be for any number of things. And, you know, all of a sudden we're seeing contracts with 10% commission, $12 rebate, $4, you know, this, $3 that. And all of a sudden, you know, there is $20, $30, $40 in there that I'm sleeping in the bed and I don't know it. We become a legal entanglement. We become that, hey, I didn't know that. I want my money back. I didn't want to pay for busing. I didn't want to. This was not disclosed to me. Is really the way we see it legally. It's really the end user. Now, if all we say is, hey, it's up to the organizer if they decide to disclose or not. We just want them to take the onus to disclose. If they decide not to disclose, that's up to them. But if the legal entanglement happens, that transference of responsibility, it's their onus, and we're held harmless.
I totally agree.
That's a perfect segue. One person asked, is it customary practice for third parties to request commissions on revenue streams other than guest rooms? And she also asked if it is legally required to disclose the commissions to the client and the attendee.
Is there a trend in other revenues? No. We don't see it. We hope never to see it,
Right,
but
exactly.
anything's beyond the realm these days. But no, we don't really see that. We see it really isolated to the room's revenue. Is it legally? Is it illegal? In some states, it is. Some states there is no legal requirement. But from our standpoint, and to protect our company, we require disclosure, and we will walk away from people who refuse to disclose. Because usually, when we follow that line, and there's all this ho-humming around, and no, what happens is someone isn't being honest.
Right. Well, and obviously getting everything in writing certainly helps clarify transparency, right? And
Right.
makes it a lot more obvious. Are you okay with a planner not only making sure that if a commission is being paid, that it is in the contract, but also the reverse, that if I don't want one paid, and I want to make sure that nothing is being paid just because I overheard at a reception that, you know, so-and-so's having a meeting, are you okay with that kind of language as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you encourage that with people to put things in writing that
Full
way,
transparency.
Right? Fantastic. Any other question on the transparency side?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, some people feel that these are hoteliers believe that the end user, the associations, should actually increase their registration fee in order to, as opposed to forcing the hotels to provide the rebate back. And the feedback that they receive from attendees is that the hotels are gouging the guests as opposed to having that transparency to the attendees so that they know that's the association who's increased the room rate. Do your colleagues ever discuss
Someone
that?
has to pay for these services. You know, I think we need to call a spade a spade.
Right.
People do not work for free. Okay? You don't, I don't, we don't work for free.
Right.
There is money involved, and I have to make a living. So people who are professional third-party people, from sourcing to planning to anything, they got to make a living. They got to be paid. Now, who should pay that? It goes again to the 1 per 50 on comps and everything. Somehow, this got affixed as the hotel expense, and it should be paid by the hotels. And I think that's up for debate, quite frankly, on who should pay that. I know customers who will hire third parties, and they don't want it commissionable. They will hire them. They will pay them. It's a very transparent billing. These are my services. This is my markup. This is and major billion-dollar travel companies do business this way. I don't get a lot of commissions from those types of companies. So, and should it be the responsibility of the attendee to pay? Well, again, it comes up to the disclosure. If I'm paying a reg fee, there's a lot of things in the reg fee. But language that says, you know, you're paying a reg fee for content accessibility, for the meals, for all the planning that it took to bring you this event, the production, everything. If I was running an association, I'd want that in there.
So the transparency is make sure you get language in the contract. Again, that's all clear. Get scopes of work from those people you're working with. Hold them accountable for obviously making this happen. I hear third parties all the time say, "I can get you a better rate because of blank, blank, and blank." Is it costing me more because of commissions? Is it costing me less? I think that's one of those big unknowns out there.
It's always a prickly question.
It is.
You know?
It totally is.
And I will answer it the way I answer anybody that asks me that question. Number one. I don't set the rates. Okay. The hotels don't set the rates. The market sets the rates. So in a time where the market is very strong and you can set whatever rate parameter that you can get. You know, in the year 2000, where the economy was so robust, you had the dot-com just explosion. The demand on hotels was enormous. You saw rates escalate year over year by 30, 40%. Availability, if you wanted to have a meeting and you waited for in the year, you were taking 2 days when you needed 4. You just, you needed to have a meeting and you just went wherever, okay? In those days, commission is going to be a cost. You are going to pay for that commission. In economies like today, where there's lots of availability, hotels are going to have to figure it out, but the market has set the rate. You can't go above this rate, so it ends up being a cost to the hotel. But, you know, I'll tell you, if you remember the energy crisis, and you remember how quickly, and I think it was California hotels that started, because it was really in California where the energy costs were skyrocketing. And part of it was, again, unscrupulous people, you know, buying and selling futures in energy, but it was causing a lot of problem. That's a big cost to a building that has, you know, 1 million, 2 million square feet of space to heat or cool. So energy costs were quickly added to people's bills, $2 and $3. So we're trying to recover that. 10%?
Well, the transparency
we look for ways
side,
to recover it.
The transparency side and the concern for the organizations always is, well, then what good is my signing a contract today for something 5, 6 years later if you guys are just going to tack on random fees and et cetera? How can I protect myself against that?
Well, we can't tack on random fees. We have a contract. You know, we just can't say, well, your room rate was, as much as we'd like to, because what's happened in the last 3 years since this, you know, horrible downturn that we're all faced is that people who signed contracts in 5, 6, and 7, where time was good, all of a sudden is finding themselves that the market has adjusted the rate. Now, we bought a future. You know, I bought GE at $89 5 years ago. It's like 12 now. I'd love to go back to GE and say, you know what, the market now is this and I want more shares and I want my money back. You know, the rest of the world doesn't operate this way. When you buy a future, which is what we're buying, is a future, you're tied to that future. Now, with that said, we try and show goodwill. We try and help customers with their pain. But in pure transparency, in 2001, where the market wasn't so good and we were booking whatever we could, and when we got to 2004 or 5 and it became much better, we had to live with the prices in those contracts. And our expectation is it's a two-way street. So I am more than open to write a contract that says, find a way, and our legal department would, you know, want to be involved in this, but to find a way to how do we manage that. I'm not sure how we do, nor do you have a contract unless you really outline a price and you can determine damages if that contract were not to be executed.
Well, and in talking about commissions, one of the things we've seen a lot of over the years, and it's certainly a huge question mark in the industry, is this transference of commissions. If I do all the work today as your third party, right, and I'm supposed to get a commission, and then somebody comes in later, 2 years in between when I booked it and when the actual meeting's going to occur, the hotels, some of the hotels have been switching who's getting paid. How do you feel about that whole practice?
In Hilton, you don't have to worry about it. You're named in the contract. PlanNet, in the case of your business, would be named as the the receiver of that commission. Whether you're fired or not, you're getting that
And do you feel the
commission.
industry should do that? I mean,
Yes.
that should be an accepted practice?
You're party to that contract.
I've seen a lot of interesting situations in recent years, and even where cities are going to organizations where they've already been booked somewhere else, contracting and saying, why don't you come to our city and I'll pay your cancellation fee to come and move your city. How do you feel about that?
I think it's
talk
unscrupulous.
about transparency
I think it's
issue, right?
unscrupulous. You know, there is enough business out there, tens of thousands of accounts and associations and corporations, that to go chase booked business and to spend your time doing that, please go work in another industry.
Yeah.
We don't need you.
It's unfortunate. I mean, we see so much of it in the industry. And
Yeah.
was there a question on that you had raised your hand on? No. Okay. So from a standpoint of the full disclosure, transparency, everything else, how do we get there? How do we make sure? What are the channels? What are the ways we can, both as planners, hoteliers, and everyone else that's on this call and show, what else would you suggest we do?
I think everybody's role has to be clearly defined. The expectations of who's being paid what and by who has to be defined. And it all has to be in one document. You know, we're very particular about it being in one place. We don't do the side agreements. You know, even though it might reference it, we want it all in one document. And that's our standard. And we think it's served us really well. You know, we do hundreds of thousands of events a year. We do billions of dollars of group revenue a year. So far, we haven't been in court by anybody. So we feel pretty good about our track record.
So you feel that obviously the planner needs to have a lot more tenacity to drive and ask you more questions, or the people that are working for you and that are in the industry on the supplier side.
Yeah.
Do you feel the hotelier the same? How are those hoteliers going to get that from the planners? How do they ask those questions?
We just have to be point blank. And if there's pushback, what I tell our folks is, if someone doesn't want to disclose, if someone doesn't want to put it in writing, again, there's tens of thousands of other pieces of business, even in this down economy. Let's move on.
Well, let's watch another unique Canadian experience, and then we'll come back to continue exploring.
Isn't that amazing? Did you ever see that happen before?
Oh, I've never seen a close racer in my life.
Oh, I got this on video.
Welcome back. Every webisode brings unique experiences and great opportunity to ask questions and pull things out. And I think we're able to get into some pretty important topics that continually need dialogue and open dialogue and direct dialogue. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask Rob if he would like to share a few things with us, or is there anything you'd like to say in general to everybody in moving this forward and moving this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I'd like to say to our industry, after being in it for over 30 years, I have family in it, my brother's in it, my niece is in it, my nephew's in it. Let's not spend our time on these topics year over year, on attrition, on transparency. We should be better than that. We were under attack 2 years ago by the media, by our elected officials, and we couldn't mobilize, we couldn't voice what our industry does and the importance it plays in our country's economy, in the world economy, and in the ability to educate adults. We're the largest educator of adults in the world as an association system or a meetings industry. And we should take pride in that. We shouldn't spend our time talking about this stuff anymore. We should spend our time talking about ROI, and the next time that happens, that we're heard and that people understand the importance and they don't cannibalize our business.
Rob, thank you very much for being our guest today. We really appreciate your time and obviously the experience sharing that you've been able to give us all in this. And hopefully we can continue this dialogue very openly at receptions and everything else that we're at in upcoming days. Please don't forget to tell your coworkers, tell other people in the industry that you can actually watch this session recorded right after this, but also all the other sessions that we've actually visited in the breakout room. To get there, just go to yourmeeting.com and click on the breakout room, and you can click right to see any of those shows. Certainly we want to thank the CTC, the Canadian Tourism Commission, again for being the sponsor of this event, and it's been great being in Toronto and experiencing this city again. When you want answers, ask it in the breakout room.